why is untreated sewage ending up in rivers in Europe?
Well, the primary reason for this, the specific untreated sewage problem, is that a lot of these systems are quite old. So essentially, there are two ways you can build a sewer system. You can build it so that your rainwater and your foul water or your sewage go into separate pipes, or you can build it so they all go into one pipe. And a lot of older systems were built so that they all go into one pipe. And what that means is that when it rains, the pipe gets filled up, the system can't cope, and you have these escape valves, release valves, that then put the mixture of water into rivers and the sea, it's supposed to work that way, to stop the water sort of backing up into people's homes, onto the streets. But obviously it's not an ideal situation, because you then end up with all of the nasty stuff from people's homes and businesses polluting rivers and the sea. And what we've seen in the UK is that actually these systems are spilling not only on those days when it's raining really, really heavily, but much more frequently than that.
Yeah, and so the effects of all of this sewage on people and wildlife.
Yeah, exactly. So, what you find, some of the nasty stuff you find in sewage, you find, very high levels of nutrients, things like phosphorus and nitrogen. And what that causes is, build-up of things like algae in rivers and sort of other waterways, which chokes out everything else. So all the kind of nice, native sort of pondweed and things like that you might get that provides a habitat and food for wildlife, can't survive anymore. And then you also get bacteria, so you get things like E. coli, which obviously is what makes the headlines quite frequently when people get sick. They accidentally swallow some water, some gets into their body in some kind of way. Sorry, it's not very nice at this time in the morning.
I know.
And that obviously is not brilliant for people who are sort of trying to enjoy the waterways, use them for recreation and fun.
So what could be done to stop these spills then?
So, the ultimate kind of silver bullet solution is obviously to separate them out. And we talked to people for this story who said if you were starting from scratch now and a lot of newer systems, you would separate them out. But unfortunately, that's extremely disruptive and expensive. It would cost probably, in this country where the estimate has been done, hundreds of billions of pounds was the estimate. So it's really, really, really expensive. There are things that you can do to reduce the amount of water that actually ends up in the sewers. And really the way that you do that is by slowing the flow. So, instead of paving over everything, creating more kind of rain gardens, creating more soakaways. What they've done in Paris to try and reduce their problem was to essentially create sort of basins to store the water, to stop it flowing down into the system quite so quickly. So you can kind of create a system where you have valves that stops everything sort of going down right to the bottom straight away. So there, depending on your budget and how much disruption you want to cause, there are a few different options.
Yeah, budget is quite an important one though, isn't it? I suppose, why hasn't this been addressed or fixed before? Is it climate change? I know everyone's wild swimming now, but surely people knew about this, quite some time ago.
Yeah, I think, I've thought about this a lot in the UK, because the water companies for sure knew that, this was how the systems work, but I think it came as quite a shock to the general public. I think it's one of those things where there have been so many other issues with rivers, especially if you think about European rivers, they're also polluted by agriculture, by industry, there's mining, there's a lot of other things going on, that it really hasn't kind of risen to the forefront before now. But what's actually happened is regulation, has tightened up on all those other sources of pollution. And now, we're really getting to the stage where the combined sewer overflows are taking up a much greater proportion of the problem. And I think the other thing, as you say, is that people are increasingly, looking to use the waterways for recreation. I think this is something that happened a lot during COVID, wild swimming in the UK. And, I talked to some really interesting campaigners in Belgium who are sort of trying to do the same thing, trying to get people to engage with, say, the canals in Brussels or in Ghent as something that's a resource. It's something nice that you can use, for fun, which is really not possible right now, especially for swimming, because they're just not clean enough.
Is this just a European problem, or has it been experienced in other parts of the world as well?
So it's not unique to Europe. There are combined systems, especially on the sort of east coast of America. The older systems that were built sort of a little bit longer ago tended to be combined. There are some combined systems in China and Australia as well. I think the thing about Europe is that because, some of the first sewer systems in the world were in the UK, and that's where it sort of spread from. We have a really, really high proportion of them. So it's about 70%, I think, that are combined, which is, that much higher than other parts of the world. But I think there probably are other rivers that are being polluted in this way, and it's just not really talked about or known about. So, I wouldn't say it's unique to Europe, but, I think it's going to sort of raise up the agenda everywhere in the world.